What's up guys, my name is Ace, and yesterday for Battlefield 6 we got a post-beta debrief that outlined a bunch of things that they learned from the beta and some general changes they're planning on making between beta and launch. So in today's video, I just wanted to go through this list, share the details with you guys, and share my opinions as we go. Before we get into that though, they also shared this image here with just a bunch of stats that they collected throughout the beta. These are global stats, like almost 5 billion enemies were killed throughout the beta, 30 million were revived. Some really interesting and surprising data here was the deployment rate per class. It turns out Assault was the highest pick at 32%, Support was the next highest at 26%, then Engineer at 23%, and then finally Recon at 19%. This surprised me quite a bit. I thought Support would definitely be the highest pick by like a noticeable margin, but it was the second highest pick. And I also thought Recon would have been a higher pick than just 19%. In either case, they also stated here that this was the biggest and most played beta in Battlefield history, which isn't surprising at all. It was clearly very popular, and I think that's great news for the franchise. Now let's get into some of the changes they're planning on making between beta and launch. A lot of this will be tested in Battlefield Labs, and also keep in mind this isn't necessarily going to be a comprehensive list of every adjustment they're making. These are just the key learnings as they pointed out. And starting it off with the weapons section, there's going to be a general pass on recoil and tapfire characteristics across all weapons in order to further emphasize their unique feel and improve range differentiation. They're also making changes to encourage more controlled tap firing and burst firing to reward precision and weapon mastery. And I'm very curious to see specifically what they're planning on doing here. Like, are they going to be increasing spread, decreasing spread, increasing recoil, decreasing recoil? Maybe it just depends on the weapon class. Maybe they're going to be buffing certain classes and nerfing other classes. Either way, they are going to be making some changes here. And they did outline some specific changes that are coming to the M87A1 shotgun that we had access to in the beta. With that, they did specify they are nerfing it and it will require more pellets to kill, which I think is appropriate. It was definitely fun using that shotgun, but I also felt in many situations I was getting kills with it that I probably didn't deserve. So I am on board with a nerf to this. I just hope they don't take it way too far and nerf it into the ground. Additionally, in the weapon section here, which I think is a little out of place, but either way, they mentioned they are investigating the time to kill versus time to die experiences, which is more of a netcode issue rather than a weapon balancing issue, but I'm glad to see that they've acknowledged this because this was a common complaint throughout the beta, and it was a complaint that I had as well. It's not that I was experiencing this all the time, but it was happening enough to me that it did make a spot in my review video, and I'm glad to see they're looking into it. Next, let's talk about movement a little bit. They are going to be adjusting movement mechanics for a more balanced and traditional Battlefield experience, meaning momentum, especially horizontal speed, carried from a slide into a jump has been reduced. There's also a greater penalty for consecutive jumps, which will lower your jump height when jumps are spammed. Firing while jumping or sliding will result in increased inaccuracy. There was some inaccuracy while doing that, but not that much realistically in the beta. And these changes are designed to make sliding and jumping more situational, so they're no longer ideal options for engaging in gunfights, and it will contribute to a gameplay pace that rewards more skillful movement without becoming too fast or unpredictable. Now, this had quite a few people concerned. However, the devs clarified a little bit that these are very localized adjustments to specific parts of movement where things could get too extreme. They said they want to retain depth and skill expression with movement, and they also said movement is going to be getting more responsive in general places that have felt a bit clunky before. So from the sounds of it, it looks like they're not nerfing movement into the ground. It seems like they're more so just going to be targeting those really spammable movement techniques like bunny hopping all over the map over and over and over again. Obviously, time will have to tell on this. I'm curious to see what this actually looks like and feels like overall, especially with it being more responsive in some areas. Overall, even as somebody with primarily a Call of Duty background, I'm not opposed to toning down some of the movement in the game. I just hope they don't take it way too far. I don't want to feel like I'm running in mud all the time and things are just too slow and clunky. So I hope they manage to find that nice middle ground there, which it seems like that's what they're aiming for. Now, on top of that, they did mention with parachute physics, they're going to be retuning them with reduced initial acceleration when opening the parachute for more controlled aerial movement. And I definitely think some tuning was in order for the parachutes, although I don't think it was just the initial acceleration. I think it was also just the speed at which you were able to move and the distance you were able to cover with a parachute. It did seem quite extreme in the beta, so I'm wondering if this will have an effect on that overall. It doesn't sound like it since it's just the initial acceleration, but we'll just have to wait to see how that goes. After that, they've got a section on maps. And with this, they first mentioned they observed some players finding a way to reach rooftops and venture out of bounds. This would be primarily on Siege of Cairo. And they confirmed this gameplay is not intended for these maps, And the upcoming ladder for the Assault class is also not designed to access these areas. So for everybody saying that this was intentional and it's supposed to just be difficult to get to these spots, but you're supposed to be able to get there, no, that wasn't intended at all. They are actively working on adjustments to prevent unintended access and ensure gameplay stays within the intended boundaries. In saying that, I really wouldn't mind a bit more verticality on Siege of Cairo, but more deliberate and controlled verticality rather than just letting people get to essentially any rooftop on the map. Now, after that for maps, they also acknowledged the fact that tons of people were unhappy with the smaller, faster-paced size of these maps. This is something they did address throughout the beta as well, and basically they're just reiterating here. They did purposely focus on including the smaller, more chaotic experiences for the beta, and there are much larger maps that are coming for launch, and they will be testing those maps in Battlefield Labs between now and launch. And that's good news as well. I am curious to see how big these maps are and how well they play. I know some people have done some data mining and there are some map size comparisons out there, but we won't really know how they flow and play and feel until we actually get our hands on them, or at the very least see some gameplay on them. After that, they've got a section on game modes, and when it comes to Rush in particular, they went a little deeper into why they went with a smaller player count for Rush than what many people were used to in some recent Battlefield games. And they stated they purposely went for a bit of a smaller player count this time around in order to create a more balanced and tactical feel where you wouldn't run into overwhelming defenses and stalled front lines when you have too many players available, when you have to get literally to one specific point, which is at MCOM, rather than breakthrough, which you just have to secure a general point. So it looks like they are sticking to their guns on this one, and they also reiterated that if you enjoy a really large-scale Rush experience, you can do that with the Portal system. But for the core experience, they are sticking to the lower player counts on that. Personally, for me, that was less of my concern, but more so it was how they designed the maps and specifically the spawns surrounding the MCOMs. And I had a similar feeling when it came to Breakthrough on some of the maps and the specific points on Breakthrough for certain maps. I think there were some clear imbalances there, and they did mention they will be making map-by-map balance adjustments toward their goal of 50-50 win ratio for both attackers and defenders. And that's exactly what I mentioned in my review for this. I think in modes like that, there should be a roughly 50-50 chance, assuming both teams are perfectly equal, and then I think it should be the skill and teamwork that will push those odds in your favor throughout a match, rather than the moment you spawn into the match, you already have a massive advantage over the other team, and your odds of winning are already significantly higher than theirs. As for the next point they mentioned here, they described their approach to player counts, and essentially they just pointed out the fact that instead of locking maps and modes to a fixed player count, regardless of the map or mode that you were playing, this time around they wanted to adapt the player count to a specific map and mode combination. So with Breakthrough, for instance, some map layouts will support 48 players, while others will support 64 players. And it really just depends on what plays best for that specific map and mode combination. And they mentioned it is an ongoing process as everyone gets familiar with map sizes, lanes, and combat spaces. So from the sounds of it, it looks like there's a possibility we'll be seeing some adjustments to player counts now that they've collected a bunch of data, but they didn't really specify any specific changes they'd be making here. Next, for playlist options, they did mention a limited variety of playlist options were created for the open beta to both showcase and test the flexibility of the matchmaking system. So at launch, it looks like they're not going to be limiting things nearly as much when it comes to our playlist options. And they also mentioned playing with both open and closed weapons will continue to be options in Battlefield 6, and we're looking for ways to keep them easily accessible. And as expected with this, it was clear they were trying to push the open weapons much more than the closed weapons, and it seems like they just added the closed weapon playlist to appease the very vocal group of the community that was pushing back against the open weapons and just wanted to see closed weapons. I'm not surprised at all with how they handled that approach, where they kind of just put that off as a side mode, whereas everything else was all just open weapons. When it comes to my opinion of that, I do think the gameplay overall is a little bit better with closed weapons, but at the end of the day, open weapons played just fine in my opinion. And I think it's quite clear that's going to be the primary focus with the game. They are going to be standing their ground on that, but they're also still going to provide an option to play with closed weapons. However, just like we saw in the beta, I doubt it's going to be a really highly populated portion of the game, and therefore down the road, I wouldn't be surprised at all if it becomes hard to even find games with the closed weapon playlists. Additionally, in this section, they just mentioned they recognize some players experience difficulty finding games to complete the challenge of capturing sectors in Breakthrough or Rush. They said it wasn't ideal, and they're actively using feedback and in-game data to review and improve the matchmaking system with the goal of providing a smoother experience in the future. And in my eyes, when it comes to that, it's not even really a matchmaking system problem, it's more so a challenge design problem. You should never be implementing challenges that require you to get lucky in order to even have a chance of making progress toward that. It's one thing to limit it to a specific game mode, because anybody can choose a specific game mode. It's another thing entirely to limit your challenge progress to whether you get lucky enough to spawn on the attacking or defending side, because that's something the player has zero control over. And if you don't get the right side, you literally can't do anything about that to progress that challenge. That's a clear issue here, and that creates matchmaking issues because when people spawn on the wrong side for the challenge they're trying to complete, they will often back out of the game and try again, meaning they're opening up spaces that need to be filled on the wrong side, where other people are also not wanting to end up on that side because they can't progress the challenge, which means when you're searching for those game modes trying to get this challenge done, you're more likely to end up on the side that you don't want to be on and that can't progress the challenge. And it's just a never-ending cycle that kind of feeds into itself. So I think especially with limited time challenges like that, they should really be ensuring that any challenge can be progressed regardless of whether or not you're on the attacking or defending side. So in the case of that challenge in the beta, I think it should have also applied if you disarm an MCOM if you're on the defensive side, or in Breakthrough if you recapture a point that the enemies had just captured. That would at least ensure that no matter which side you get, there's a chance that you can make some progress toward that challenge. And that's pretty much it for the things they outlined. They did also say at the end, with the insights they gathered during the open beta play sessions, they will be introducing in-game adjustments in upcoming Battlefield Labs events, and we should stay tuned for progress updates and future opportunities to get involved. So there we go, a good handful of key changes at least that they're looking at making between beta and launch. Overall, a lot of this stuff sounds good to me. It seems like they're addressing a lot of the complaints and issues. Obviously not everything, but again, this isn't a comprehensive list of all the changes that are coming. And what I'm hoping to see down the road, like as we approach the launch of the game, is a more comprehensive look with like actual patch notes with specific changes that they've made between the beta build and the launch build of the game. I think that would be really helpful for a lot of people that are maybe a little hesitant after playing the beta because there were a handful of very specific issues that they were not a fan of. If we can see exactly what they did to make changes to those, then I think that would definitely be helpful to understand what we're getting into at launch. Now, of course, these are all just my opinions of this, and this is where I want to hear from you guys in those comments down below. Based on the debrief we got today, how are you feeling about these points that they addressed? Are you guys generally happy to see these changes that we can expect? Are there any changes that you were hoping they were going to be mentioning in this, but they didn't mention at all? Just let me know down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.